Hello there! Welcome or welcome back. I'm Ari. Today I'm going to talk about the most disappointing, the absolute worst books that I read this year. Now, not all of these are bad per se. There are some just objectively bad books, but these are just the ones that I didn't like. So maybe this video will help you not read these, or maybe this video will be like, hey, I actually like the tropes that she hates. Maybe I'll like that book. But let's get into it. At number 10, I have a book that I can't talk about because it's published by St. Martin's Press. I'm obviously not going to tell you the title of this book because we're not talking about St. Martin's Press books, whether it's good or bad in this case. So maybe they got lucky with their boycott with this one. This is an old book. No one would be reading this anyway. I'm going to quickly tell you why I didn't like this just to get past it because you don't know what book it is. I'm not going to tell you. You could probably search through my 2023 reads on Goodreads and figure it out if you really care. This man figures out how to time travel and goes back to the 1960s so he can have a trad wife. And his sister-in-law gets pregnant and her husband dies in Vietnam, but the baby has a heart defect and is gonna die when it's born. Except for the husband teaches her to time travel so she can go forward in time to September 11th, 2001 and save the baby. He's from 2018, but he doesn't remember why she shouldn't be in New York on September 11th, 2001 at 8 a.m. It's weird. All of that aside, the reason this book is really bad is you time travel by jumping off of high things. That's it. Math and jumping off of high things to time travel. Yikes. At number 9, I have The Keeper of Night by Kylie Lee Baker. This is about a woman, she's like a creature. She is half English Reaper, like a Grim Reaper, and half Japanese Shinigami, which is very similar to a Reaper, just Japanese. She is grown up in England. She faces a lot of prejudice. She doesn't like it, so she flees to Japan where she faces a lot of prejudice and then has to figure out how to be her own person even though she's half Japanese and half white. And she's not a person. She's a mythical creature. The book itself isn't necessarily bad. The pacing's fine. The story's fine, it reads really fast, but it has a romance in here, and this book should never have a romance because our main character is a sociopath. There is no universe where you can tell me this woman falls in love because she is completely incapable of emotions. There's also like child and pet death in here. I mean, it makes sense. She's a mythical creature that collects souls after death, so there would be a lot of death in here, but that bothers some people, so just letting you know it's in there. It was the romance in here that got me. If you don't mind sociopaths falling in love, then maybe you'll like this book, but it wasn't really for me. Next up was Tread of Angels by Rebecca Roanhorse. And I expected to like this, but I did not. This is basically an episode of Law and Order set in a fantasy version of the Wild West. And there's angels and demons, because obviously the title. Our main character, Celeste's sister, has been accused of murdering an angel, and Celeste has to represent her in court and prove that she didn't murder this angel. I disliked a lot about this book. I didn't like the main character. I just didn't like her. The relationships and like how people interacted with each other didn't make sense to me. The main hero or love interest was super abusive, and I don't know about y'all, but I'm not really interested in abusive guys as love interest. Celeste trying to protect her sister was ridiculous when Celeste knew nothing about her sister. Half of the twists of this book are Celeste finding out things that she didn't know about her sister, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense when she devotes her entire life to protecting her sister. Like, why would you not know these fairly basic, simple things? And then, like, the solutions to the plot and the mystery aspect were all, like, super convenient and kind of stupid. She just happens to stumble upon the answer that will free her sister. Yeah. I'm good, thanks. I made a note in Goodreads that I recommend this to people who want to read about awful things happening to awful people. Because I think everybody in this book is kind of awful and a bunch of bad things happen. But yeah, this one, not for me. It was an arc that I got from NetGalley, but I definitely won't be continuing on in this series. The next book up is The Regional Office is Under Attack by Manuel Gonzalez. This is a dual perspective book about a group of lady assassins, or like two groups of lady assassins that are like competitors. And in the book, the regional office, which is one of the groups of lady assassins, is under attack by the other group of lady assassins. Now, this book is probably like a very niche type of story. It reads like a bad action comedy. So, like, superpower fighting, but ha 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 funny type thing. It's just not my kind of book or movie or any form of entertainment. I don't like comedy. I don't really like lady assassins that are comic relief. It was... ugh. I just didn't like the tone of this book. I didn't like the story of this book. I thought it was ridiculous, but it's supposed to be ridiculous. This one is just 100% not for me, and it doesn't have to be for me. So if this sounds like something that you would like, it's not like bad writing or anything like that. It's just, I don't like this particular flavor of humor. Next up, Clawheart Mountain by David Oppengard. This is one of those books that I think is supposed to be funny, but takes itself a bit too seriously. And the author doesn't treat teenagers like human beings who can think for themselves. Like, this man obviously thinks teenagers are idiots who should never be left alone for anything based off their behavior. The main character is a female, and this young woman was obviously written by a middle-aged man. Like, there's no... this man has never spoken to a woman, much less a teenage woman. She is stereotypical male fantasy, goody two-shoes, easily influences, dumb as shit. The other teenagers are stereotypical, wealthy, entitled assholes. And they feel like they were written so the reader doesn't give a shit when they die. Let me set the scene for you. A group of teenagers go to Clawheart Mountain to spend a weekend, a week or something like that, in one of these kids' family's cabin. And as they are driving to the cabin, they see an armored truck that has been battered and looks like it's in a wreck and just completely torn up, and there's just money everywhere. So instead of calling the cops, trying to figure out what happened to the armored truck drivers or why there's all this blood around, they just steal the money, or steal as much as they could fit in the car that they have right now. And then they just drive to their house. Now, the money apparently belongs to some crime syndicate who want their frickin' money back. And the armored truck has been wrecked because of Bigfoot. So you have these kids running from assassins, trying to get the money back, and everybody running from Bigfoot. Do I need to tell you why I didn't like this book? I don't really know the audience for this because I don't know what it was actually supposed to be, whether this is a serious horror that was just really badly written or it's a horror parody that was also really badly written. But yeah, I didn't like this, even though it's a very pretty book. Beautiful, horribly written. Next up, I have Poster Girl by Veronica Roth. This one's gonna be really easy why I didn't like it. This feels like Nazi apologist propaganda. Our main character is literally the poster girl for a Nazi-like regime, and when they were overthrown, she was arrested. And the whole story talks like, well, I wasn't really that bad. I didn't know that all these bad things were going on. It's not my fault that I'm like the perfect Aryan child. I don't really think that's what Veronica Roth was going for based off of like what I know about the author herself, but it really felt like Nazi propaganda, and it just made me super uncomfortable. So again, another very pretty book, but I don't want to read Nazi propaganda. Next up at number 4 is The Green Man of Ashwood Hall. Now this kind of follows a bunch of people who live in this Ashwood Hall place, which is an English estate, I guess. The problem with this book is it's a hot mess. There are just multiple plots that'll start a story, kind of go nowhere, and then switch perspectives and then start a new plot. But none of these plots are ever finished. They're not answered. The tone of the book is all over the place. You've got chapters that read like they were written for a middle grade audience with very childish stories that most adults wouldn't be interested in reading. But you can't give this book to a middle grader because there are other stories that are graphically smutty. So a child can't actually read this book because we don't need a child reading about some of the topics in this book. This is apparently supposed to be a horror, but the horror is like the last 15 to 20 pages of the book. And it's not very horrific. But yeah, this book is just a hot, steaming, messy pile of absolute shit. It also has a very low overall rating on Goodreads, so most people agree with me on this one. I think you could probably safely skip this book. Even if the synopsis sounds interesting, I don't think it's worth it. Maybe if you desperately want to read this, get it from the library. Don't spend money on this. Next up, number 3, we have The Coven by Harper Woods. I read this because I thought it might show up on the Goodreads Choice Awards in the fantasy category. It ended up showing up in the romantasy category, and oh boy howdy did I have problems with this book. So as you could probably guess by the title, this is a story about witches, and I don't like cliche witch stories. If the story is going to tell me these witches come from Salem, Massachusetts, I automatically hate it because it is so problematic to base your witch stories off of a real life, horrible set of events that had nothing to do with actual witchcraft. So strike 1 automatically for any reference to Salem. But this is about a witchy boarding school where different witch families can practice different types of magic, and it's like 12, I think, though I could be wrong with the number. Children of these families with these type of magic go to the school and kind of like are being taught to grow up to represent their families in each type of magic. Our main character has like this green magic, like plant magic, but she also has this other forbidden magic, and she's not like other girls because obviously. Teachers at this school are vampires. So they're like demons in the bodies of human who have to drink blood. So they're not called vampires, but they're vampires. And the headmaster of this school, who is a vampire, and the headmaster of a school is obsessed with this main character girl, and they have a lot of sex. And that power imbalance is so icky to me. Just bleh, icky to me. I don't like it when adults in positions of power use that power to have sex with children who they have power over. I know I'm being redundant, but I just... So, in addition to the cliche witch thing that I already hate, it got worse with the... It's not pedophilia because she's over 18, she's an adult, but the power imbalance thing. Yeah. Yuck. A lot of people like the age gap, power dynamic romance things. I'm just not one of those people. So I hated this. If you want to read it, live your best life. In number 2, I have After All by Heidi McLaughlin. This follows a girl named Brooklyn, and Brooklyn grew up in a seaside town and met the love of her life, got pregnant, and while she was pregnant, he died in a fishing boat accident, and she couldn't deal with that, apparently, and moved away and never came back to the town. And it's 15 years later, she's never gotten over this man. His mother, who runs a inn there, asks Brooklyn to come back for some reason. I don't remember, like she's dying or it doesn't matter, but she convinces Brooklyn to come back and bring her daughter. Now the daughter has been going to see her grandmother every summer. Brooklyn just stays away and just sends her daughter off to visit her grandmother for the summer. So the daughter's used to being there, but Brooklyn hasn't been back in 15 years. And when Brooklyn gets back, it kind of gets into the Nicholas Sparks rom-com thing, except for the plot is so thin and so, like, stupid. I'm gonna spoil it here, so if for some reason you want to read this, maybe skip to the next book. Brooklyn's baby daddy has a best friend named Bowie, and Brooklyn kind of starts falling for Bowie. It seems to be set up that Brooklyn doesn't want to betray baby daddy Austin's memory by getting with his best friend, which that would have been a fine love story. I probably wouldn't have loved it, but it would have been fine. But no, that's not what happens. What happens is apparently when Austin was out on this fishing boat dying, Brooklyn and Bowie had sex and the kid is his. So she cheated on this man as he was dying. 15 years later, he finds out that he's had a daughter this whole time that has been hiding from him because this girl lied because she felt bad that her high school sweetheart died and has been obsessing over him and how this is the love of her life since then. He wasn't the love of your life. He was just a man. You fucking cheated on him. Move the fuck on. But yeah, also the 15-year-old daughter, Heidi put her in there as a plot point but didn't know actually how to write her, so she came across as like a 7-year-old who was like, "Mommy, can we go to the fair?" And it's like, this is not a 15-year-old girl. This is a young child. So yeah, it was badly written. The plot was a hot fucking mess. Jesus, don't read this book. And number 1, the worst book I read all year was Lily and the Octopus by Stephen Rowley. Now, this book was a Secret Santa present, and I hated it. So, Lily is a dog. First and foremost, this is about a dog dying of cancer. Who wants to read a book about a dog dying of cancer? Like, in the beginning, it's a really shitty plot point. I guess if you want to force yourself to cry or feel some sort of emotion, maybe that's what gets you going, but not something that I ever wanted to read about. And then the octopus is this cancerous growth, but this adult man who is Lily's owner, 40-year-old man, has this like childish life perspective where he can't admit that his dog is sick, and so he calls the cancerous growth an octopus and has conversations and mental battles of will with the octopus. And it wouldn't have been so bad if he just, in his own head, referred to this as an octopus. But he would like go to the vet and be like, I need you to look at Lily's octopus. And the vet would be like, what are you talking about? And he'd be like, look at her head. Don't you see the octopus? And the vet would be like, the cancerous growth? He'd be like, it's not cancer, it's an octopus. This man is 40. Jesus Christ. But yeah, I hated it, like the original plot line of just a dying dog. But when you put this like childish behavior from a grown ass fucking man on top of an already miserable plot line. Worst book I read all year. Easily the worst book I read all year. Those were the 10 absolute worst books I read all year. Let me know down in the comments what your worst books are so I can avoid reading them. And I will see you tomorrow for another video. Bye.